system, understanding the brain and body. So you might have a client that you want to send to this, feel free to. You might have a friend, okay, that you want to send to it. You might have a family member. This is open forum, just send them the link. And whenever we're talking about a case, of course, it will always be confidential. We'll use those as examples of things. So there won't ever be client information on here. So this is a great opportunity, especially for maybe some of your clients that you're working with that seem to be struggling, not really knowing what's going on. Send them here. They might not understand everything that's going on, but this is a Friday resource for everybody that you can think of, okay? And it's available to you. Sometimes it'll be pretty high-end stuff, but we can also, depending on who's on, maybe make some changes periodically, okay? Let's go ahead. We're going to start with the slides. And let's go, just want to review. On the same page. So I don't, is that up on full screen? Yeah. 1 second. Perfect. Okay. So we're always going to get back to this. Okay. And even when you feel like you got it all down, I always want you to go and go back to this. Okay. We're going to go back to the fact that the whole body, from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, all works off of electrical current. All my cells need that energy. My brain needs it. My heart needs it. Today, we're going to talk a lot about the heart as an electrical device. Okay. But always be thinking about electricity. You see that patient, you interact with that person, and you're thinking, what is going on in how they're making electrical current, which we talked about last week. And remember, the number one way that we're making electrical current is out of oxygen, 90%. Remember that? We said that last week. 90% is coming up out of oxygen, okay? So that is so important. We're going to talk specifically about that today. The other elements like nutrition, hydration, super important. But I'm going right to oxygen first when I'm working with somebody, finding out how they're breathing. And the second thing I'm going after is how are they sleeping, okay? So a lot of times we kind of get distracted down here with food, which is good. Nutrition is good, those kind of things. But we need to hit those top two items, oxygen production, how they're working with oxygen, and how they're sleeping. And in the next few weeks, we're going to talk more in detail about sleep and look at sleep architecture, polysomnographs, all kinds of really cool stuff. But always be thinking about how we're making energy. And the second thing is how we're managing it. Let's flip to the next slide. And we talk about this a lot, and we're going to keep coming back to this. It's the autonomic nervous system, okay? It's all about autonomic nervous system, okay? This program, what we do, is not about neurofeedback. This is not about HRV. It's not about sleep study and using light therapy to reset the circadian rhythm. This is not about nutritional elements and energy. Are those subsets? Yes. But the overarching system is understanding the autonomic nervous system, and particularly, every once in a while, I'll put the R on there, autonomic nervous system regulation. How do we regulate it? And that can only start with first a good assessment and analyzing the different systems and what they're doing. So what is that telling me about the autonomic nervous system? We talked about this last week, is we want to be looking at, is the data telling me that the autonomic nervous system is in a slower parasympathetic state? And as we look at this diagram here, there's different things that happen to the different systems, and we didn't put them all in here, I just put a few here, in the parasympathetic responses that the systems are telling me. So neurologically, in the brain, what happens is we produce more theta waves when the brain slows down. In my visual fields constrict. My salivation becomes stimulated, so I produce more saliva. You've ever had this happen when you're really tired and go take a nap, and all of a sudden you accidentally drool on the pillow, right? I had that happen a number of years ago when my kids were really small. I was tired from working on the ICU all day, and I came home and I just crashed. And next thing I know, I like see these bright lights kind of flashing, and I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? And I hear my kids laughing, and they're taking pictures of me while I'm sleeping. Why? Because I was drooling all over the place. Well, what was that telling me about my autonomic nervous system? I had gone so fast and pushed it so hard that my saliva glands had been so inhibited that the moment I shut down and went to parasympathetic, my body said, man, we got to get to work. We got to start digesting the food. So it produces saliva. And that's why when you're stressed, you'll find situations that you get a dry mouth. Why is that? Because you're going to sympathetic, and the parasympathetic shuts down. Heart rate slows down. Bronchia constricts. Gallbladder, digestion starts stimulated. That's why when after you eat a big meal, you get really sleepy. Why is that? Because the body needs to digest the food, and so it slows you down. Your bladder changes, all kinds of things change. On the sympathetic side, we're going to learn more about this as we study brainwaves, but high beta waves, these are high frequency brainwaves that you're going to learn more about. They start amping up, which then sends signals to the hypothalamus, which then tells the pituitary gland to release a chemical, and then that chemical tells the adrenal glands to pump out adrenaline, and the adrenals get activated. Those adrenals get activated out, adrenal fatigue, where the adrenal glands can't listen to the message sent to them. Acceleration of heart rate, stimulate glucose release. We talked about this last week. Is that when the hypothalamus releases to the pituitary gland, which releases to the adrenal glands. This is called the HPA axis, which you should become very familiar with. Every drug company in the world is trying to figure out how to regulate the HPA axis. This is the heart of all stress-related illnesses. But the HPA axis initiates the action of the adrenal glands, which sends out norepinephrine, epinephrine, and cortisol. And then once that released, every cell normally just takes in a few channels of sugar. But the moment the cortisol gets released, then the cells start absorbing massive channels of sugar so that we can get energy into the cell, okay, which is great if I'm running from a lion. If I'm not running from a lion, and this is happening while I'm sitting on my desk, or on my drive to work, or when I'm having a conversation with my wife or my kids, it's not a good thing. Because that's not the way we were wired. We need to be in rhythm. Okay, so that's kind of a review of last week. Let's move ahead a slide. And we're going to start talking about HRV. But before I do, I want to make sure that we've wrapped up this section. And next week, will be a shorter recap of it. But you will hear of a recap periodically on this, on the energy, how we're making it, how we're managing it, how the autonomic nervous system works. It uses senses to know what's going on in the environment. Before I leave this and we get into HRV, does anybody have a particular question related to manufacturing or making of energy, and then the management of it through the autonomic nervous system and the different reactions that take place? Can you open the chat window? Let's see if there's a far right. Send a chat. Just text here. Okay. So just if you want to use the chat window, if you don't want to come on voice, that's fine. It's okay. Does anybody have any questions? You can either verbally or you can send it via that chat window over there that popped up about the autonomic nervous system. Now is your chance, that opportunity to ask a question. Okay, no worries. Let's go ahead and let's start talking about heart rate variability. So what we're going to now do as we move forward is we're going to take these overarching principles of autonomic nervous system analysis and autonomic nervous system regulation, And we're going to start to apply those to different systems in the body. And the place that we want to start always is where we're getting the most energy, okay, which is out of the oxygen. So it's this absolutely beautiful, wonderful interface between the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system that fuels the entire body, okay? So we want to look at this interface and understand it well. You have some great tools available at the offices you work, or if you're helping physicians or different practitioners learn how to use these in different settings. You got great tools that allow you to assess the autonomic nervous system. I'm going to just talk about how to really get the most out of those. Okay, so when we talk about oxygen, we need to understand the interface. Let's just go straight whiteboard and then we'll come back here. Okay. So when we're talking about oxygen, we've got the oxygen out here. Okay, and then we have in here can you change that? Share the screen. And then make mine bigger. Can you do that? Okay. 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 So when we look here, we've got oxygen, and the oxygen's coming into the lungs. Okay. I'm not an artist, please. So excuse me here, but these are the lungs. The oxygen's coming in. And inside of these lungs are these little hair-like structures called alveoli. Okay. And they're all around the lung. They have a kind of a bigger surface area on them. And each lung has 300 million alveoli, giving us a total of 600 million of these alveoli. Okay, so when the oxygen comes into this balloon-like structure, it interfaces with the surface area of these 600 million alveoli. And when it interfaces with them, the oxygen gets absorbed into there, and then from there, it gets distributed into my blood system, and the oxygen starts to interface with the cardiovascular system. And the oxygenated blood happens through this coming in here. But the real trick in this is how these alveoli are absorbing the oxygen. So let's look at what is the surface area of this. So if I took all these alveoli, 600 million of them, it would equal the surface area of a tennis court. Okay, that's a lot of surface area. Okay, that's pretty amazing, really. Is that the way it's designed within the lungs? The engineering of this is absolutely incredible, mind-boggling, really. Is that these little hair-like structures create enough surface area, the way they're distributed, that we can cover the surface area of a tennis court with the oxygen. Unfortunately, the way the average person in the United States breathes, they only cover the surface area of a ping pong table in each breath, because they tend to use more the top half of the lungs for their oxygen exchange, and then they leave down here all the carbon dioxide. And this just sits here. And actually, one of the most toxic things to your body isn't gluten, these things, those are not good for you when you have a problem with that. Isn't heavy metals, all this, those are very bad for you. But what's even worse is how this carbon dioxide sits in the bottom of the lungs and just creates problems within the body. So there's two things going on here. Is we need to get the oxygen all the way to the bottom, and we need to get the carbon dioxide all the way out. Okay, and when I can get the oxygen all the way to the bottom, then instead of these shallow, short breaths only cover a small surface area, now I'm covering a larger area per breath, and the heart can start to relax. And it can start to, even in a stressful situation, I can create the oxygen exchange in such a way that I can have a special ops guy behind a sniper rifle, life and death situation, but he's breathing in such a way that the heart is staying calm and steady. Okay, right now we're just trying to get people to interface with their environment accurately because they're over-interpreting their environment and having anticipatory stress about what if, all these worries, and they're amped forward. But not only can we get them more connected and aware to their environment, but we can also, those that have to be in stressful situations, like Julie, your athlete that might be in a stressful situation, how does she still stay calm and in the zone no matter what's going on? One of the key variables is getting the oxygen flow into the lungs in such a way that the heart can relax. Okay, so the main piece in this, when we look at the heart and the breathing, is looking structurally at how this works. So if we kind of go with a kind of a side of a person, okay, this is awful, my drawing here, but let's say this is the stomach, okay? Now, if the stomach and the diaphragm here does not get out of the way, then the lungs have a very difficult time opening up correctly, okay? This is kind of a side view. Actually, those lungs would be this way. What I need to do is biomechanically, structurally move the lungs, move the stomach and the diaphragm in such a way that the lungs can fill up and we can get the oxygen in. That's why the breathing belt sits right at the belly button, okay? Because I want to create a habit in the person that has become very lazy, where they're not using this. They're just letting their belly kind of sit there and not be active in the breathing process, and primarily breathing up here like this. When your person sits down to breathe and their shoulders start moving like this, that's a key to you. Oh boy, they've learned a habit of breathing that they think is normal. It's going to be very problematic to them being calm. You'll see these anxious people sit down, and before I even start measuring their breathing, I'll see their breathing. The shoulders are trying to work with the top part of the chest, and there's nothing happening down here, okay? So what we need to do is get them active here and keep those shoulders nice and steady when we're breathing, okay? So when you're teaching them to breathe, keep the shoulders steady, okay? So the first thing, before I even talk about oxygen exchange in and carbon dioxide out, okay, is how do I structurally or biomechanically work my system? And so I put that breathing belt here, and it's giving me the motion of the stomach so that the lungs can fill up. So let's all just practice this for a second, okay? I want you to put your hand on your stomach, take your free hand. No falling asleep, okay? Take your free hand, and this is very attractive when you do this, okay? But nobody's watching you. You guys get to watch me. Okay, so I'm going to push the stomach out, okay? And I'm going to hold it there for a second, and then I'm going to pull it back in. Take your free hand, push your stomach out, hold it for a second, and then back in. Do that again. Ready? Out, back in. One more of those. Out, hold, and back in. Okay? A couple different things here. Great. You guys, I think, are getting it. We really need some good back support. So in the chair, make sure the small of their back is up against the chair. A lot of times you get these people to put the belt on and they'll kind of be slouching back like this. And there's a cavity that forms between the small of their back and the chair. That's not good because then it's hard to get that stomach out. So we really want to get that butt up against the back of the chair and get that back flat and then do that movement so we have something flat and stable to push against. For your people who are having a really hard time breathing, send them home with this exercise, okay? Lie down, put something on their stomach like a book or a little pillow or something like that, and try to push that up with their stomach and then have it then come down. That is very easy to do because you get all of the support for your body. What's hard to do is what I was talking to Julie about earlier, is to stand up, no support, and be able to breathe in such a way that you can still keep the heart coherent, keep the coherence going in the heart and the breathing, okay? So structurally, we're moving that out. A couple of the things on this is when you're doing that, you want to be thinking of, when I get it out, most people when they breathe, so they're breathing and they inhale and then they exhale, okay? That's a problem because up here, they did all that work to get oxygen in, but they didn't let it saturate for a second all the way into those deep recesses of the lung. So we never want to see this shape on a breathing screen. The shape we want to see is a rounded shape, okay? That's the shape I'm looking for the breath. It comes up and it's round, comes down, and it goes up, and it's round, okay? Why is that? Because that roundness is what encourages that saturation. So when I come out, I hold for a second, and then back in. So then let's practice this now with breathing on top of it. Okay, so I'm going to do my biomechanics of moving, but I'm also going to do the exchange now. Try to encourage your clients and yourself, I want to encourage you, is to don't let the in and out of the inhale and exhale direct the movement of the stomach, but let the stomach direct what you're doing at first. Okay, now as you get better at this, the breathing will just do its own. But I want you to work on mechanics first. So when I inhale, I'm pushing the stomach out, filling the lungs up. Okay? So let's do about 3 of these. And then when I exhale, I'm pulling the stomach back in, carbon dioxide out. Okay? So let's do 3 of these. Ready? Here we go. Inhale, hold, exhale. Inhale, hold, exhale. Inhale, hold, exhale. Now you're going to run into a client. I just had one out in Charlotte this week, or Charlotte area this week. Who when we try to breathe, they say, "I feel like I should do the opposite." Okay, and you'll see that in about 30% of people. And these are people that have gotten into such a bad habit of breathing that this feels like it's going in the exact opposite direction. You have to encourage them, though, that they have to switch it. And typically those people have some form of underlying anxiety, or maybe even some apnea or something like that, where their breathing is so upside down that to breathe normal feels very odd to them, okay? People always ask, should I breathe through my nose? Should I breathe through my mouth? There's no magical formula on this. I typically, because I work with a lot of athletes, a lot of people in stressful situations, I try to have at least the exhale out through the mouth so they can hear it. Because you're not always connected to the equipment. So like Julie was sharing about this patient of hers. This girl's going to be out doing her sport, and doesn't have her monitor. She's not walking around with her monitor all the time. So she needs to get in a rhythm that whatever she's doing in the chair, she can replicate that. And a great way to do that is with the sound of your breath. So I'm inhaling, and then I'm listening to the exhale. So if I'm a golfer and I'm over that putt, I'm inhaling, and then I'm hearing that exhale. And right at that exhale, I'm putting. Or if I'm at a free throw line, and I work with a lot of NBA athletes, and they're at the free throw line, and they're inhaling, and they're listening to themselves, and then as they exhale, inhale. Hard to do in the middle of a game, but when you're in a free throw line or you're getting set up for a three-pointer, you get that inhale, ball hits you, and then pitchers, same way. Even I work with sports announcers where right before they're going to deliver, I have them get that deep inhale, and then they start their response, okay? Now, the reason for that, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself here, but let me explain that, if you're looking for people that need to do point of action, like I just talked about, or a sniper rifle, when do I pull the trigger? Is we've got the breathing. This is, 3 breaths of breathing. They're about 10 seconds apiece. Okay, so 6 per minute. And then you've got, when you get really good and the coherence gets high, you're going to see that the heart tracks right along this. Okay, these are called the inner beat intervals of the heart. They track right along this. Now, during this state, this is super important. Okay, so really pay attention here. During this state, when I'm right here, think about this from the autonomic nervous system perspective. Okay, when I'm right at the bottom of my breath, I am now out of oxygen. No oxygen. My heart and my respiratory system doesn't know that I'm going to start to give it oxygen again. So at this point, what does it start to do? The heart starts working harder. And if you look at the inner beat intervals, they become very, very narrow because it starts to work harder because it thinks I'm going to be out of oxygen. Okay, track with me here. This right here, this upward cycle right here, is a sympathetic response. This is really cool. If I looked at your pupils, they would look different here than they would here because you're in a sympathetic state. If we actually looked at your adrenal system, it would look different here than it does here in each breath. The cells would be slightly different in how they're absorbing sugar. Every part of my autonomic nervous system anticipates this low oxygen as a stressful state. And we can see it in the cardiovascular system. I get to the top. Now what's happened? Now I've gotten every amount of oxygen I need. And every system in my body then does what? A parasympathetic response. And we're regulating the rhythm of these two so that I'm now controlling what I'm doing, sympathetic and parasympathetic, where when I'm not controlling my rhythm, my breathing, I can't control the heart, what the heart's doing. And so the heart's doing this, and then the breathing's kind of doing this. So there's no way to find an interface at which I know what's really going on. And so when I start breathing correctly, and I create these moments where I get a ton of oxygen and I force a parasympathetic state, now I've created what's called point of action. So at this point right here, I will be at my perfect spot. So if I'm going to strike a ball, like a baseball or a golf ball, I'm going to do it right here. I wouldn't do it right here if I can control it. Why? Because everything's, even my pupils are seeing things differently at this point than right here. My peripheral vision is less here, and my depth perception is less here than here. All kinds of things change once I give it the oxygen. Okay, that's probably more than you wanted to know, but I do a lot of work in the sports arena, so I thought you'd be interested in that. Also, when I've got somebody that's in a classroom setting and they're getting anxious and they're all stressed out, I start doing their breathing. And I said, let's not answer the question until we hit point of action. Don't try to do it down here when you're holding your breath. Get in rhythm. Close your eyes. Inhale. Now let's look at that question and listen to it. Maybe you're getting ready to make a stressful call. Before you do that, breathe in. And then start your conversation. Get that parasympathetic response going on. Okay, so let's switch over to the slides. And we're going to go about 10 more minutes, I think. Yep. Let's look at a few cases, or let's first look at how the interbeat interval works. Okay. So I just showed you the breathing cycle. And when you see the breathing line, it's the blue line on this graph. And then I'm sorry, the blue is how the heart is working. And these little dots are the interbeat interval. So you'll notice when we look at hearts in a second that it's kind of stair-stepping. Okay, that stair step is the space or the time between the beats of the heart. Okay, so normally we're looking at, let's look at pulse, and let's say somebody's got a 60 pulse. That 60 tells you how many beats are happening in a minute. But that isn't enough for us, because I can have a 60 pulse and have awful coherence and not have a perfect balance of parasympathetic and sympathetic, or I can have a 60 and have a super high coherence and have a really nice balance of the two. So what creates that? We're taking somebody with a 60 that could have interbeat intervals that are all the same. So every second, the beating of the heart is happening. Okay, and you can kind of see that on the bottom in the ECG. Okay, this, if it was just a second every single time, is not as healthy for the system as to have variation. That's why I call heart rate the variability. The greater the variation in the interbeat intervals, the more resiliency or expanse the heart can have under stress. Okay, so look at the beats below, and you'll see that as we're doing the dots upward, they start to get closer to each other. Why is that? Because the heart's in stress. Well, then what happened to them once I gave them oxygen? The interbeat intervals, the fan became wider. And you'll see this in the ECG. Now we use the BVP, which is using an infrared sensor. So the signal on there doesn't look like the ECG, but it gives you still the same interbeat interval. The signal on on the BVP, which is the infrared sensor through the skin, that sensor is picking up the pulse, the blood is coming there, and you get a signal that looks more like this. It has this little notch in it, and then it comes down, goes up, has a notch, and then down. And so what happens here is the same as the spikes that you see in the QRS signal, is this spot here. This becomes where the interbeat, or what's referred to as the IBI, interbeat interval, happens. Okay, so you can get the same thing without having to put the electrical sensors all over the chest and be really invasive. You can still get this interbeat interval, which is so important to us. Okay, we're going to go into here's a question here. How do we access a report that looks like this? Well, I'll show you on our graph that we give you where this is happening. This is seen in the coherent screen. You don't really need this, but we could figure out how to get you something that looks like this. This is a little bit more detail than the client or you might need. What I want you to see here is the reason that red line starts going up, because the interbeat intervals are becoming faster. So you're looking at time. And if you actually took a line, let's see here. So I've got my interbeat intervals, and they're getting faster, and then they're getting slower, and then faster, and then slower. Okay. These are all different spans of time, right? But if I took the average, it would be the pulse. And I'm not really concerned about the pulse. I'm concerned about the interbeat interval. So let's look at a few of these, and then we'll take some questions afterwards. So let's look at a coherence slide. Okay. So here you have a respiration rate of 12, and That is pretty average. If you took, we each year at our clinics that I developed a number of years back, we see about 50,000 appointments a year. The average in those centers over 8 years was about 13.2 breaths a minute of people that come in. So this person is respiratory rate of 12. They're right around that, what you're typically going to see. Okay. So the respiration rate I know is too fast, because we should see, when you look at a screen, it's a 30-second window, and I want to get 6 breaths a minute. When I'm looking at that screen, I should see 3 of those cycles of the blue line. Okay. And when I look at this one, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Ultimately, it's going to come up to about 12 to 13 that they're averaging. And so you see that choppiness of their breathing. And I want you to start to look at breathing this way. Okay. I want you to take the breath, and here's the breath. And let's say it's real choppy like this. Okay. Okay, that's not exactly that one, but I want you to look at it, and I want you to take it and try to make it more 3-dimensional in your mind. This will help you a lot, okay? And the way I'm going to do that is, let's say I take a line and I go over the tops, the peaks, okay? Okay, and then I take a line and I go across the bottoms in my mind. And you guys see the shape that I formed here with the black line? Now, think of oxygen going into a tube, much like gasoline goes down a fuel line. Okay? So if I do that and I go down this tube, what is going on with the flow of oxygen as it goes through that tube? See it 3-dimensionally? Okay? Imagine this is kind of like a 3-dimensional tube. And you can see that it's like opening and closing. Imagine if I did that to the engine in your car. Set the gasoline through a line that was like this. It wouldn't run well, okay? So I need this to be more symmetrical, okay? So then when I take a nice symmetrical one, which we're going to look at in a second, but here I'm looking at nice symmetry, good amplitude, good symmetry, good rate, 6 breaths a minute. But now look at it 3-dimensionally. We're looking down the tube again. Okay? Top. Look down the bottom of the tube. Imagine I'm taking in oxygen to the heart. What do I see? Nice, smooth oxygen flow, because I'm controlling the rhythm of the heart. Okay? And I'm creating a nice even tube. That's why we're getting symmetry, amplitude, and rate. That's always what we want to do. So this person, if I was to draw a line above there, it would be horrendous. Look at their tube. If we draw a line on that, we draw that line across that, and then we draw it down the bottom of it. So we're going across the top of this tube, right? And then I do it across the bottom. I mean, this thing is going, and then it crunches down, and then it opens. This person almost has what I would call awake apnea. They're so lazy in their breathing that they're out of breath, okay? We've got 12 breaths a minute. This person's also got a high heart rate of 94. And then the coherence, which is the synchronization of the breathing in the heart, you can see that the heart is not working with the breathing at all. And so we have a high level of stress in this profile. Let's look at another one. Okay? And then just hit the, let's use that one. Awesome. Okay, so let's change the line color to maybe like yellow or something. Perfect. Okay, so let's look at the line. We're going to do, oh, that's not good color, but let's try something different. All right. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so look at the top. They still could work on some things here. But my tube now, top, and then look at the bottom, is much more consistent. So now the oxygen flow is really stable. And then look what the heart's doing. It's becoming very rhythmic. And you can see on that second heartbeat how the beats of the heart become faster. And then all of a sudden they start to become slower, the interbeat interval. Their heart rate stays the same at 59, but the interbeat interval, we're getting more variability, which then allows the individual to be able to expand in stress. The greater variability in the interbeat interval, the more expanse the person can manage in stress. So this is a really good one here. This HRV, ultimately, I want to get this person up in the 90s. When they're in the 90s, the two will layer right on top of each other. And they'll start working together, the cardiovascular and the respiratory, in a perfect synchronization. And something about the synchronization, we'll finish with this. Yeah? Is the way the heart works is, if we go back to kind of the autonomic nervous system, if you go slow to fast, okay, the heart works off of all these different frequencies, much like the brain does. It's actually 0 to 0.4. Okay? And the fast frequencies, what we're going to call the sympathetic state, and then you've got your slow, your parasympathetic, okay, is you have a bundle of these frequencies that are specifically designed to slow your heart down. I think it's better to kind of maybe do it in blue. Okay? You got this part, these are all kind of parasympathetic components of brake pedals in the heart, and that brake pedal is your vagal nerve. So it's the vagal response that controls the slowing down, okay, of the system. Then you've got these set of frequencies that are fast. Now, normally in your mind, you would think, well, okay, right here are the fast ones, and then right there are the slow ones. But that's not actually how it works. There's an overlap here where the fast ones can go down a little bit more, sympathetic ones, while the blue ones are here, and they overlap, so that there's never this point where they're not kind of helping each other out. Okay, so they have like a blend of the frequencies in the heart, in the inner beats. Okay, and it's right in here where coherence happens. So I start breathing in such a way that all of a sudden the coherence shoots up, and that coherence actually isn't just a sum of these two. You know, it's not like A plus B equals C. But actually what happens is when these two blend together, they create what's called a resonant frequency, where literally the strength of the heart starts to rise here. And in this point here, this is called resonance. This is where the heart is actually working harder than if you are working in a more, not harder, in a more efficient, calm, focused way than it would if you just went here for a while and then went here and tried to equal out the parts. It's not how the heart works. When you create this blending, which happens with the oxygen flow, you create what's called a resonant frequency. And that's where coherence happens. And what you're reading as that number increases is this perfect crossover of sympathetic and parasympathetic that actually the heart becomes stronger over time. Okay? Let's go ahead and finish up. I'll take a few questions if you have questions. I know we talked about a lot. We'll probably do one more on the heart, and then we'll move to breathing in a couple weeks. I'm not breathing, the brain in a couple weeks. But I want to do one more area on the heart and breathing. Maybe a half a session next week on that. Okay. Any questions before we finish up? You can either type them or you can maybe while you're typing a question or asking one, let's look at what our resources for this week, okay? And we'll send these out, I think, on probably Monday this next week. is our resources here that I'd like you, that we're going to send to you is, had a great article in Sports Illustrated about a year ago now with Kirk Cousins, who's was a quarterback for the Redskins. Now he's a quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. You're going to love the article. He talks a lot about breathing, heart rate, brain work. I think you'll love that. So that's our article of the week. I still want to keep our book going. I should have called that the book of the month. Okay. The book of the month is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Okay. Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. The article is this Sports Illustrated article that I think you're going to love with Kirk Cousins. Talks a lot about, he and I have worked together for close to 7 years now. Fantastic. And then there's a great video I want you to watch from Rob Bell, who's an author and a speaker, was named a few years back top Time magazine's top 100 influential people in the world. Great guy. I had an opportunity to work with Rob for a number of years, 2007 to about 2010, and he's going to tell his story. And his story tends to resonate with so many people. And I think you're going to find when he tells his story that he's going to hit some things that are not only going to hit home for your patients, but they're going to hit home for you. Okay. And we're going to send that link to you. I want to invite you next week to feel free to invite as many people as you want. We're going to keep plowing through these topics, and we're going to keep using some different illustrations. If you have a case study or something you want us to look at next week, feel free to let us know. Just make sure there is not any identifying information on that. More than willing to work through a case study if you'd like. Before we sign off, any questions? Anybody? No worries. All good. Great having you guys today, and we'll see you again next week. Keep breathing, okay? Keep the breathing going, okay? We'll see you.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye-bye.